Good morning, everyone.
On your monitor if you want. I bet.
Thanks for attending today. We have a really great treat with us today. We have our state archivist here, Mary Beth Herkert from the state of Oregon, and she is going to help explain to you records management for the 21st century. And just your attendance here today shows that you, first of all, you value city records, you understand that they are an asset, and that you want to learn more about the corresponding laws that are associated with that. So it's just a really great opportunity we have to have Mary Beth here. This morning's session is being recorded, and it's going out on the internet live. There are several cities throughout the state that will be tuning in this morning, as well as you can access it after the fact. If you have a colleague who would like to watch it who couldn't make it this morning, you're welcome to preview or review the materials later as well. Again, we were fortunate to have Mary Beth here, and let me tell you a little bit about this lady so you understand that she is qualified to tell you what she's telling you today. Mary Beth has worked for the State Archives since 1985, working as a processing archivist, a records manager, and manager of the Records Management Unit. She was appointed state archivist in December of 2005. Prior to coming to the State Archives, she worked on a one-year grant project at the University of Oregon Special Collections, processing the papers of their conservative and libertarian collection. Mary Beth grew up in Buffalo, New York, and received a bachelor's degree in anthropology and history at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, in 1982. She received her master's degree in history in 1984 at the State University of New York at Albany, and while there, she worked as an intern at the New York State Archives. Mary Beth is a certified records manager, a certified archivist, and has served on a number of archives and records management boards and committees. So we welcome Mary Beth today, and I hope you enjoy the training. We will have opportunity for questions at a Q&A at the end, or if there's something that you really need to ask during the presentation, that's okay too. However, we do ask that you use the microphone and you speak really closely to it, so that it's recorded as well. Your question is recorded. We'll be bringing the microphone to you, as well as you can come up to this wired mic right over here. So, right there. Anyway, Mary Beth, welcome.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. Yeah, there's a reason why I tell people that I'm from Buffalo, because I tend to speak a little bit fast. They had this test about this little quiz, and it could tell you where you were born based on the way you answered certain questions. And they said I was from the Great Lakes region, and I just couldn't believe that they could pick that up, because I don't think I have an accent. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is managing records for the 21st century. We've tried to manage records forever, but then probably in the late 1990s, this thing called the internet reared its ugly head and changed our whole business and how we create records and how we deal with records. And so now we have, instead of just dealing with paper all the time, we have these things that you can't see, and but we're still responsible for managing them. So we're going to try to give you some tips and clues on how to deal with those today. And to start with, and if we can, all right. Now it's not moving forward. Yeah.
Arrow for now.
Yeah, I just tried the next key. I think this is frozen, or there's a dialog box open, maybe.
Yep, there is.
Yeah, the shield at the bottom that's blinking. Let's do an update.
All right. See, technology is wonderful. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So just to start off, just to kind of tell you a little, give you a little idea of how much our world has changed, is 9% of annual budgets in the corporate world are dedicated to e-discovery. 9%. we spent 2.5% of our biennial budget setting up an electronic records management system. So you can see the difference having an annual cost of 9%, or doing something a little bit proactive to manage that e-discovery piece. The DuPont company reviewed 75 million pages of records and found only that half were past retention. And the cost for the review of that was $12 million. And I don't think they're the exception to the rule. I think they are the rule. 25 to 40% of our time is spent searching for the right information to complete a given task. And I know that's I think, a conservative estimate in a lot of cases. We can only retrieve about 22% of the records relevant to our case in an e-discovery case. So that leads us to settling out of court because we can't be sure that we have everything. So therefore, we'll settle out of court instead of trying to find the other 78% that might be relevant to the case. Agencies without active written policies and procedures will spend 1/3 more time on e-discovery than those that have written policies and procedures. And so it is cheaper to settle out of court than it is to go to court. So what's the solution? You have to become proactive to manage your information. And that's a lot of times easier said than done. But we start with knowing the laws. And for government, it's a little bit easier because we don't have the corporate structure or politics sometimes that you play with corporations. Their rules vary depending on who the current CEO is of the company. In government, you just need to know the laws. And we're going to start with the public records law. And in Oregon, the public records law, not unlike many states, is split into two parts. The first part deals with retention and disposition. The second part deals with access. In 2011, we went to the state legislature and asked to have the public records law updated and revised and changed. The original public records law was written in 1961. And in 1961, the social media gurus weren't even twinkles in their parents' eyes. And that's basically what we're dealing with. Cloud computing was, clouds were something in the sky, not something associated with a computer. And a computer alone probably occupied the size of this room and maybe had 25 megabytes worth of storage in it. And at a great processing speed of, something that today, if we had to sit there and deal with it, we would be, what's wrong with this machine? So it really wasn't a relevant law anymore. It didn't take into consideration what we were creating and what we were doing with our records. So went to the legislature and asked them to change the law. The only other time they had changed the law was in 1989 when they added the term machine-readable records to the definition. And for those of you under 30, machine-readable meant an electronic record. It was something that required a machine to read. So we went in and said we want a definition that's totally technology independent and totally based on content. And this is what we came up with. It's a 3-part question. You have to answer yes to all 3 parts to order to have a public record for retention and disposition. The first one, everybody's going to answer yes because you wouldn't be asking the question if you didn't have a record. So is it prepared, owned, used, or retained by a state agency or political subdivision? And then the next question is, does it relate to an activity or a function of your agency or division within your agency? And that's going to be a yes or no. If you answer yes, you'd go on to question C. If you answer no, you don't have a public record and you can get rid of it as soon as you don't need it anymore. And the last question is it necessary to satisfy the legal, fiscal, administrative, or historical value that your agency or your program may have? And if you answer yes to that question, then you will have a public record. The other key change to the public records law is that second paragraph there that says you can create it in one format and retain it in a secondary format. And that's huge because when you're dealing with social media, something like Facebook, you're not going to own the record once you post it to Facebook. Facebook owns the record. But you can have it and retain it according to the retention schedule in a different format other than a Facebook page. Facebook could care less what I say, how long you need to keep a record. So we wanted to make sure that when we're dealing with these different technologies and newer technologies that come down the road, that you're doing your due diligence by keeping the information, because it is the information that carries the retention, not the format, that you can create it in one format and then retain it in another format. So that was a huge change to the law. The law for public records access hasn't changed since 1973 when the law first came into play. And that's still the definition. So you can have a public record for access, but you don't have to retain it, such as voicemail. That's one of the clear distinctions. It's a public record. If somebody wants to access your voicemail, they can, but you don't have to retain it. So as soon as you listen to your voicemail message, you can delete it. There's no retention associated with it. But you can also have public records that have retention and disposition associated with it that you don't have to provide access to. Okay, and those are the ones that are exempt from disclosure. So you need to make sure that you understand the law is two very distinct parts. So just because it's restricted from access doesn't mean it doesn't have a retention associated with it, that it's not a public record for retention and disposition. Okay, the other law that always comes into play, especially in light of technology, is the public meetings law. Government has always been open in Oregon. The intent is that government is open and transparent, and that's why our public meetings are open. So you need to be very careful when you're chatting or using email that you're not inadvertently conducting a public meeting, because you have a quorum of officials that are participating in a discussion that should really be held in a public meeting. So you need to be aware of those things when conducting business over social media. Social media is really one of those, or texting and tweeting, and that's come into play in a couple of counties where commissioners were texting between each other during a commission meeting, and then they were found to be in violation of the public meetings law because they were having a discussion about what was going on in the meeting, and it really should have been a public discussion, not a private discussion through texting. So I know there are some places in Oregon that have told commissioners they have to check their phones at the door, but the legislature allows them to bring their iPads and their laptops and their phones to the hearings, even though there may be a public hearing. So you just need to keep in mind that when you're using technology, the laws don't go away. Any question on the laws? All right, so they are all-inclusive, and they don't distinguish between home or office. They don't even distinguish between, this is my phone, I pay for it every month, but I'm hooked into the state email, and so all my email messages are public record. Fortunately, mine go right to my email box, and any responses I do go right to my email box. But if I were to be conducting business on my personal account, my personal email account, they're public records. It doesn't exclude it just because it's my phone. Same with your computers at home or your tablets. If you conduct public business on them, you have public records on them. So, and if you work from home, you're still working. You're still doing the public's business. So there is that term that it's an old term, but I think it's really relevant in today's day and age. Is we are public servants, so whatever we communicate is the public's business as it relates to what we do. The best way to be prepared to deal with all of this is to have written policies and procedures that address use, access, ownership, and retention of the public records. And I say ownership because we are going to, a lot of us are working in clouds. You need to be mindful that if you are in a public cloud, you most likely are sacrificing ownership of that public record, and you need to be aware of that. Make sure that everybody is trained on the policy, they sign the policy, and that you audit for compliance. You need to have an authorized up-to-date retention schedule, and we're going to get into that, but fortunately local governments and cities, you all have that. We are just currently working on the reauthorization of the city schedule, so you guys always have an up-to-date and current retention schedule. And you need to use this schedule systematically and routinely. So say in accounting, well, accounts payable is following that schedule, you know, just to the letter of the law, and the folks over in purchasing, they've never followed it a day in their life. Well, then you've kind of basically said by default, we're not following a retention schedule. So it needs to be applied systematically and routinely across the board. Or like, well, I'm going to get rid of this one because it's met retention, but I'm not going to get rid of that one because I might need it down the road. And we're going to get you comfortable with throwing things away. So what is a retention schedule? It's knowing what to keep and knowing what to throw away, and being comfortable actually throwing things away. It is a good thing. The retention schedule that's authorized by the state archives, and in the city's case, it'll be in an administrative rule. That is your current and up-to-date legal authorization to destroy public records. You don't need any other authorization to destroy those records if you're following the retention schedules. The retentions apply regardless of format, so if you're creating everything electronically, those electronic records are subjected to the same retention periods as if they were in paper or any other format. So just because you create it electronically doesn't mean that the retentions don't apply. They do. Then they're a lot harder to manage, and we're going to get into that too. How do we determine retention? We really don't have any, it isn't a mystical, magical experience. There's not a Ouija board that we take out and say, okay, what's the retention on this record? Basically, we look at 4 values that a record has. The first is administrative value, and that is how long do you need this information to do your job effectively? And usually when I ask that question, I get, well, I need it forever. So I say, well, do you need it 100 years from now? And they'll say, well, no, nobody needs it 100 years from now. Well, do you need it 50 years from now? Well, no, I just need it for as long as I'm here. So permanent retention is not synonymous with the day after I retire or the day after I leave. It's just as dangerous, and I know a lot of people have a hard time believing this, but from a litigation and a risk management point of view, it's just as risky to keep on to stuff past retention as it is to throw it away. And in most cases, people are hoarders. They're not thrower-awayers. I think in all the years I've been working for the state, we've had one person who threw everything away before the retentions were done because she declared everything was ephemeral. And their agency was the subject of a $2.5 million lawsuit and lost. But there are people who just don't throw anything away, and what happens is you have those that are following the schedule, those that aren't, and everything's out of context then. And so there is a reason when we say you only need to keep a purchasing record for 4 years, there's a reason for that. It's because all the audits have been completed, everything's been done. There's really no reason to hang on to it any longer than that. And then the other one that I always like is, well, the one time I did throw things away, 3 years later somebody came in and was looking for that record, and I didn't have it to give to them. And it's like, that's okay. You know, it's okay that you said, I threw out the 1940s out-of-state travel authorizations because they met the retention period. We don't have that information any longer. We can tell you what was spent on travel back then because you have a other financial records that will give you that information, but you're not going to have the backup documentation, and that's perfectly okay, and it's okay to say that you threw it away. The fiscal requirements, we're very lucky because the Audits Division is part of the Secretary of State's agency, and so they review every schedule we write. So, and they're reviewing to make sure that we hit all the fiscal requirements, federal, state, local. So when we set a retention based on fiscal requirements, we know that it meets all the audit requirements that are out there. Legal, there's very little in the statute that tells you how long you need to keep a record. They'll tell you have to create the record, but they don't tell you how long you need to keep it. But there are a few, and we make sure that we meet all those legal requirements. The same with the federal government. If you're receiving federal funds, we make sure we meet all the legal requirements that the federal government has in place for your records. And the long-term research or historical value that a record has, do you know what percentage of records that is? You're pretty close. It's less than 3% of everything we create has historical value. So the other 97% needs to be thrown away at some point in time. And we work with agencies to determine what is historical. And for example, at the city level, your commissioners, the city council's meeting minutes, that's something that's a permanent record. But, you know, like I said, is the purchasing records, they're not a permanent record. They can be thrown away. Usually the more voluminous it is, the less likely it's going to be a permanent record. That's just kind of the nature of the beast for some reason. Okay, so here's an example of the general schedule and what it looks like in the schedule. We have an administrative rule number. That is the schedule number. That's your authority to get rid of the records. We have a title. The title might not be exactly what you call it, because we've written this schedule for all 240 cities in the state of Oregon. So we wanted something that met most everybody's needs. There's a description as to what that record usually includes. And then we have the retention periods. And retentions are based on from the day the record is created unless it's otherwise stated. So as you can see, part of this has a permanent retention. But for example, executive session minutes, they're only kept 10 years after the date they're created. And they need to be thrown away at 10 years after they've been created. The audio or visual recordings are 1 year after the minutes are prepared and approved. So it's not from the date they're created. That was an exception. They have to be approved first before they can be destroyed. And then, so this is not uncommon to see retentions like this. Most retention schedules, and this is something that we're working on in the revision, are very easy to apply in the paper world, but they're a lot more difficult to apply in the electronic world. And we'll get into some tricks that you can use for that too. Any questions on retention and disposition? So you now know you can go back and throw things away and you'll be perfectly fine with doing that, right? And so that you're going to have a big old pile of stuff in the recycle bin, right?
Mary Beth?
Yeah.
Just a comment on, or a clarification. Yes, we can throw things away according to retention, but then there's also policies in place for destruction, how to destroy them. And in our city, we require the city manager's signature on the destruction form before you throw anything away. There needs to be an authority there that has signed off on that.
And that's a good policy to have in place so that nothing inadvertently gets destroyed. Yes?
I did have one question, Pat, going back to that last section.
We need to get you on
The question I had in that last section there is that with city governments being asked to do more with less staff, there are certain records that speed up the process of doing repetitive jobs, and having some of those records templates around to build the next round of documents is something I get a lot of feedback from within the cities, in that people are concerned about getting rid of documents that could allow them to much more quickly deliver services that they need to do. So it's just something that I know that I receive information on is, why are we destroying these, or why should we destroy these when we can use these as a booster to speed up the creation of the next round of things we need to do.
Right, and there are templates, and templates then by default aren't necessarily, if you're using it as a template, then you're using that base. The public record has been saved initially, but now we're using it for a different, and we're probably using a copy of it because nobody wants to save it inadvertently and overwrite what the other was. A template doesn't meet the test of a public record, so you can retain it as long as you want. But the problem is with templates is, okay, I write this letter, then everybody says, well, I'm going to save that as a template for the next letter. Well, the next letter they write, well, I'm going to save that one too as a template. So they're just creating, they're not really using them as templates. They're just, again, it's, you have to reach the test, are you really using it as a template, or are you just not wanting to throw things away because you want to make sure that you have something there just in case? And I can justify a permanent retention for everything. I mean, really, I could, but there isn't enough storage in the world to allow that to happen. So it's a test. What's the likelihood of you're going to need something past its retention period? Most retention, I would say the average retention of a record is about 6 years. So really, is the information you gave 6 years ago relevant 6 years later? It may be, it may not be. It may be totally different. Things have changed. So again, I think a lot of cases what happens is people mistake, have that false sense of, like, if I get rid of it, I'm throwing away something really crucial. And you really aren't. The life has really lived its life. There are some exceptions to the rules. I know a lot of contracting people have a blank template that they use, and they build every contract off of that template. Well, that template is not a public record, but the final product is. So one would have retention associated with it, one wouldn't. So again, it's a test, but people should not spend more than 30 seconds making a decision on how long something needs to be kept. But we do. We are paralyzed with fear that we're throwing something away that could be crucial down the road. And that's why, as we move through things, and we're getting there, is why we're moving into electronic records management, is so that you're giving the tools necessary to make really informed decisions, and decisions you can be comfortable with.
Will you be talking about how we should handle paper documents, emails, and digital documents? Okay.
Yes, all that's coming.
Okay.
Okay, so filing and classification. How many of your online filing systems look like this? We have, I mean, I love it. It's so typical. We have folders. We start out really good. We create folders, and then we're in a hurry and we can't find the folder we're looking for, so we create a new folder with basically the same information as the old folder. So then we end up with duplicate folders, or folders that are like kind of related but not related, and then we really get lazy and we forget to put things in folders. So then we have the list of documents off to the side that really need to go somewhere else. This is what we see every day. This is not abnormal. This is very normal. So if you look like this, welcome to the club. You're no different than anybody else. There are a few people who are very good with their folders and they're very structured, but those are the people that I tend to see too, that if I open up a folder, 21 layers down, I'm still opening up folders. It's because they've just decided to create their mess within the mess. So it's how do you manage this stuff? How do you even begin to think about managing for retention and disposition when your filing system looks like this? In the paper world, we had these nice little file cabinets where everything was laid out, and they made a lot of sense, and we'd put them in there. But we still had problems dealing with retention and disposition, and the only time we ever went and threw anything out was when we ran out of filing cabinet space, and they told us we couldn't get any more filing cabinets, that we had to throw stuff away. So at least paper we could visually see. The problem with electronic records, we can't see them. So in reality, if you look at this, is our file servers for our electronic records, think of the worst episode of Hoarding Buried Alive that you have ever watched and multiply that exponentially. And that is what you have in the virtual world. We are virtual hoarders. We never throw anything out. And on top of that is we send it to 20 different people. So they're not throwing anything away. And so 20 different people have the exact same message squirreled away in their filing system. I I always tell people that I think I could go back and find, I think there's 20-some thousand state employees in Salem. I could probably go onto anybody's email file server and find probably 18,000 of the governor's food drive messages still in existence on the email system. Because nobody throws anything away. I don't see it. I'm not going to manage with it because I can't find it to do anything with it, especially if it looks like this. So what we're trying to do is work with you to develop file structures. And this, even if you go to an electronic solution, this is where you have to start. You have to start with a manual process to get to that electronic, that piece of technology that's going to do this for you. So we're going to build a file structure. What are the types of things that HR administration really does? And their main things they do are the blue highlights, and then everything else that's in there are all the subcategories that belong to that. So then we can go to the next level and kind of classify. Well, what is it truly that HR administration does? They had a Blue Sky program, they do employee personnel records, and they do position reclassifications. That's all they do. That's their three major functions within HR administration, at least in our agency. This is based on what our HR department looks like. So from there, we can go back and build their filing system. And we can assign retention to that. So that is a lot more manageable. We have maybe 3 or 4 folders on the top level, and we're not nesting down 21 levels. And I would even say that you don't even need that many nests in there. You could even eliminate those. But it's hard to change people the way that they do things because they're just comfortable. And I mean, we get this all the time, but I need those 21 folders under that file. Well, why do you need it? Well, because I need to find it. And that's the only way I can find it. And there's something really kind of weird about that, is that you're willing to dig down into the trenches just to find something instead of trying to figure out a more logical way of doing it so you can find what you're looking for easily. So one of the ways you can do that is if you have a system that will manage that information for you. So we take that classification system that we saw earlier and we plug it into an electronic system and let the software do the managing for you. So what is an electronic records management system? It's basically a piece of software that allows you to manage both electronic records and paper records systematically in one system. You tell it what you have. It tells you how long you need to keep it and where you're going to find it and when you can destroy it and that sort of thing. So it takes that manual back-end process from the user and automates it.
Mary Beth?
Uh-huh.
Just as a side comment, the system that she's talking about is something that if we get the money budgeted and our administration approves it, we're working toward making these changes. So this is kind of a precursor to what we're hoping to develop here in Oregon City to better manage our records. So this isn't just something that doesn't apply to us. It will be most likely be applying to us within the next couple of years if we can get everything in place. So I'm just trying to give you a little heads up on that, so this isn't something that's
out there.
Out there and not applicable to what we're doing today.
Okay, and in Oregon we actually have 2 choices. We can buy a standalone system, or we can use the statewide electronic records management system that the Archives has developed. The background on developing this is that we've recognized for a long time, and I used 2001 as a starting point, but actually it was in 1995 when the former state archivist and myself and the public records attorney for Department of Justice got together and wanted to do something about email. And we were trying to get it so that we were going to control what email could be used for. And in 1995, we were told, what are you guys obsessing about something so ridiculous as email and trying to control that? That's just stupid, because now you're going to clog all my servers with these files, because what we wanted to do is say that email could only be used to transmit routine messages. If anything of substance needed to be transmitted through email, it would have to be done as an attachment. So they were all freaking out over the attachments being kept on the file servers. And if we had done that, we would never have to worry about retaining email, because email would only be used for something that was a non-public record, and the public records would be on a file system. I think they thought we were from some foreign planet, because the responses that we got were totally out there. And it's funny, because I ran into a lot of those people about 10 years later, and they said, we really should have listened to you guys, because we wouldn't be managing email and like spending millions and millions of dollars with email. 2001, we tried to get the legislature to go with a statewide electronic records management system. We tried again in 2003, and it didn't make any headway. In 2000, and a lot of it was because these systems are very expensive. So in 2007, we said, okay, how about if the Secretary of State implements an electronic records management system within the Secretary of State's agency, and if that works, then we'll roll it out. We'll see how we could roll it out statewide. And they said, okay, we'll give you $1 million to go out and do this. So we did. And we went out for RFP. I had gone out and looked at all sorts of different electronic records management systems. And the system that we chose was Tower Trim. And one of the couple reasons why we got it, one was it had never been bought or sold in 25 years of existence. 6 months after we bought it, it was bought out by HP. And then it was, I never heard an end user, because I would go and look at people who had already implemented it. I never heard an end user say, I hated it. Basically, they would say, well, we just throw things in folders and they are magically taken care of. To me, that's, because I had told people, if it's going to take me more than 5 seconds to deal with something, I'm not going to use it. And if I, as a state archivist, am not going to use it, why should I expect anybody else to use it? So it was simple. And then the last thing is it was probably the most cost-effective product out there. I mean, when we got it for our agency, I think the software alone was like $680,000. The next closest was $1.5 million. So I mean, it was significantly less than that. So we began implementing it, and then we really actively began looking at how could we roll this out statewide. And we looked at keeping it in-house, but if we kept it in-house, it was going to be over $100 a user per month. And who's going to use it? I mean, not a lot of people are going to use it because it's very expensive still. So then we looked at, and by this time I had the state CIO and the Department of Justice on board. And so what we came up with is developing something as a software as a service and doing a public-private partnership and having a private cloud host the application. And so what ended up happening, we made sure that when we went out to bid, that we did everything so cities, counties, special districts, schools, whoever was a public agency in Oregon could just use the system without having to go out to bid again. And we did that purposefully because we didn't want you to have to go through the RFP process for it. And what we ended up doing is awarding the contract to the Synergy Data Center and Chaps Consulting in Baker City, Oregon. They host the hardware, the software, and the 24/7 help desk. The State Archives works with you to train you in implementing the system and getting everything built so that you can use the system effectively. So we went out in 2010, right? Was it 2010? And started actively seeking pilot agencies to jump on board. And our initial thought was, oh, we'll get 3 large agencies of 500. We'll test it as a pilot, and we'll be good. Well, the people who were interested in coming on board were the cities of West Lynn, the cities of Milwaukee, the smaller cities, the cities that were, less than 100 employees total, that wanted to do something because they could no longer manage this information. The city of Dundee with all 11 employees. And it was affordable because they're paying a monthly fee, and they actually have $1 million system for something that's very affordable to them. So the Oregon Records Management Solution was born. And the reason why we're using this is because it allows you to manage your information from creation until final disposition. So whether that disposition is permanent or whether that disposition is at some point destroying it. And it will be destroyed out of the system. We can very easily go back and find all the records that have met retention and delete them. It doesn't automatically delete them. It still requires that approval process that Nancy was talking about for the paper world. We still have that process in place in the electronic world, except for it's electronically approvals that are going through. We picked a product that's been used extensively throughout the world. And actually, the data center that we're using is actually a Tier 3 data center, so it's even more secure than the state data center. And the other nice thing about the data center that we chose, Baker City sits geographically between 2 power grids and 2 fuel grids. So it has a lot of built-in redundancy. So if the power grid in Portland goes down, they kick over to the Boise power grid. Same with the fuel. The fuel grid goes down in Boise, they kick into the Portland fuel grid. So we're guaranteed just in this initial phase with, I think it's a 98% uptime, and really we've had very little downtime with the system. We're well within that 98, 99, whatever that the contractually. Ultimately, what we would like to do is get a totally redundant site, so if something did happen in Baker City, it would kick over to the redundant site and be up and operating, so you would never notice any kind of a slowdown or a shutdown with the service. The really nice things about a statewide system is there's no upfront cost to the users. You don't have to purchase any hardware and software. You pay a monthly subscription, and right now that subscription is $37.02 per user per month. It'll go to a low of $10.54 per user per month. Our pilot agencies, those agencies that were willing to come on up front, will get a rebate once we are fully implemented and reach a certain user level on coming on early. And because it's the statewide system, is my staff can go out and work with you at no additional cost. So you really don't have to hire a consultant unless you really want to do the implementation. My staff can actually come in and build it for you and get it working. And Teresa over here has used the system. They were one of the very first agencies to come on board in West Lynn. So she can, it's not painless. Because you're changing behavior, but what really is the feedback that we get is when you want to find something, you can find it in an instant. For example, we had to go back and find all the Secretary of State's email last summer from the time she started office until the present day. We did the search. In about 90 seconds, we had 83,000 plus emails come back, and because we know which ones are restricted from use because we put in the asset classification, I only had to review 200 of them as to see as what could be released and what couldn't be released. That's how quickly the system manages your information. When it comes time to destroy them, same thing. It'll give us a report of everything that's eligible to be destroyed. We can go through that list and say, yep, it can all go, and then we delete it from the system. This is a difficult thing to see, but we spent $915,000 implementing this system in the agency, and we were paying $75.56 per user per month for the maintenance and licensing fees. $37.02 a month. Okay, That's a standalone. That's the statewide system. We flipped over to the statewide system. We're saving over $38 a user a month. The legislature really loved that piece. So if you have 500 users, it's probably going to cost you $1.1 million. Your rate goes down to about $57, $58 per user. Even with 1,000 users, you're still spending more per user in your licensing phase than you are in the state system. So again, your costs over 5 years. Standalone systems, you're going to have to refresh, buy new equipment. The statewide system, the vendor takes care of that. So you don't have any of those costs. You're just paying a flat fee, and eventually that fee will start going down as we add more users. Because it's really nice, because we have like the city of Dundee with 11 employees, but we also have Lane County with 1,400 employees. Well, they're all added together as users. They're counted together as users, so those Dundee will actually be able to get down to. So it's just not because how many users you have in your city, it's the cumulative users in the system. Why do we use electronic records systems? It's government efficiency is really number one. Is you're reducing what you're keeping, you're managing your information for the first time in a systematic and logical way. Our corporations division, business registrations, they took a 10-day process, and once they went into the electronic system, they turned it down to about a 2-hour process. Because they were able to workflow and streamline their whole business process and reconfigure it so that they don't have to do all these different things to it. They scan the record in, it marries up with their database, and it's all managed together as one. So 10 days, 2 hours. You become much more efficient in doing your job. Like I said, the ease and quickness of satisfying public records requests, they don't go down. I can tell you what happens now with the Secretary of State is because they know they can come in and find stuff, we get more requests. I mean, so it's a two-edged sword because they know we're going to be able to find it and we're going to be able to find it quickly. And your IT resources are available for other projects. The other piece is government transparency. It's really interesting when you get these phishing expeditions. When we got that for the email for the Secretary of State. Basically, the requester, when we came back and we said, well, here's what it is, how do you want it? And they basically said, oh, you got it all? Yeah, we got it all. Oh, well, we just thought you might not have it, so that's why we're doing the request. So you kind of show that, hey, we're transparent. We can get you whatever you want, how you want it, just, in the system. And your credibility level as an agency, as a public employee, rises significantly. And the best thing is, and like I said, paper and electronic stuff is managed in one system, and it's systematically and routinely managed. So you get away from this, well, I'm keeping everything, but I'm going to throw everything away. So you don't have that luxury anymore. And basically for the end user, what it literally is we work with you to set it up. You put something into a folder, and behind that folder, retention, disposition, who can have access to it, is all in that classification, is all in that embedded into that folder. So you just know, well, this is an accounts payable. I'm putting it in my accounts payable folder. So you don't have to have a 2013 accounts payable folder. You can just have an accounts payable folder, because when you do the search, your 2013s will come up as part of your search. So it just takes retention and those decisions away from you. So you don't have to say, well, is this a 4-year record or is this a 6-year record? You just say, well, this is an accounts payable record, and I know it goes into this folder. So it makes you much more systematic in what you're doing. I think I've kind of hit on all of these points. The asset classification is the 1, 2, 3, and 4 level that state agencies are required to. 1 is it's available to the public immediately. 2 is it's a it's available to the public, but access is through the agency as opposed to a public portal. So it might, like correspondence, some people don't want to put all their correspondence immediately accessible to the public. Some do, but. And then at 3 is the information is restricted from access, so that you're going to have to review the record and redact before you allow. And 4 is if it gets out, somebody will die or the world will come to an end or something. So really in the state, there's very few level 4 records, although there are people who will tell you everything they have is level 4. So we actually code that into the classification. Also, who can use the record, who can view the record, who can modify the record, all of that gets coded in. And you don't have to worry about that at all. You just tell us how you want it to behave, and we build it that way. And the system is auditable. Every time somebody touches something in that system, you leave a fingerprint on it. And we know exactly who touched it, and when you touched it, and what you did to it. And so from a security standpoint, from an audit standpoint, people love it because now they actually have a chain of custody or transaction that happened to a record. So nobody can say, well, that I didn't change that. And we can say, well, yeah, you did because you went in on this date and you did this to the record and then you refiled it in there. So it does a lot of accountability comes into the system too. Any questions on electronic records management systems? I mean, there are a million of them out there. Our requirement is that if you're going to use one, it has to be Department of Defense certified DoD 5015.2. The reason for that is it ensures updatability, accountability, portability, and accessibility. So basically the companies that are building these systems are saying that we're going to build it in such a way that if we go under, another DoD certified system can ingest the information without having to rebuild the system completely. And that is key for us at the archives. Yes, Teresa?
I would like to say that I'm a big advocate for them, and if anybody would ever have any questions or concerns, please contact me because I'd love to talk about it.
Okay, so our new favorite, we had a little bit of cloud computing. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing is it kind of got glossed over. We are in a cloud, but it's a private government cloud. Our vendor never touches the data in the cloud. They cannot see it. They cannot access it. They're just storing it and making sure the software is running properly. You retain custody of those records. I don't even see them. Well, I shouldn't say that because I'm an administrator, so I do see everything. But if I didn't have those administrative rights, I could not see them. Teresa can't see what Milwaukee's putting in. Okay? So she can only see what West Lynn is putting in, and she can only see parts of things that West Lynn is putting in, okay, unless she's been granted access to it. So nobody is tampering with your records except for how you guys set it up within your city or your agency. Unlike Google Cloud, which could be 7 different clouds in 7 different countries, it's a public cloud, and you don't control anything in that cloud. You will not get them to sign off on an agreement that says, hey, when the retention's been met on this record, you need to pull it out of the cloud for me. They're going to look at you and laugh because you're just a speck on their entire cloud universe. So yes, we're in the cloud, but it's a controlled cloud, and you won't notice anything different than what you're doing right now with hosted servers within your city or your agency. It's hosted in Baker City. Social media, our next favorite topic. And you know, when I started this job 29 years ago, 28 years ago, whatever it is, a long time ago, if you would have told me that I'd be talking about this stuff, I would have laughed. I would have said, you know, you guys are crazy. You know, this is never going to happen. This is all we do, is deal with electronic records and now social media. It's a great tool. But think about what social media is. It's called social media for a reason. It's a social tool. It's a way to communicate. It's not a way to conduct public business. You should not be negotiating contracts. You should not be evaluating employees. And I know people laugh and think that I'm nuts when I say this, but we've already had instances on Facebook where people were conducting confidential business on Facebook. Facebook's probably the least confidential medium out there. Even if I'm not your friend, I can find you because all I have to do is have a friend of a friend of a friend, and I'm in on your page. So you need to be aware of what social media is. There are standards out there. There's an international standard that's been written on it. But I really encourage people to use it because it's a great tool. This is the Secretary of State. When she first came into office, she told me, I'm using social media. Figure out how we're going to do this and still be in line with the public records law. And it's like, well, blogs I really don't care because blogs are easily captured. So what we did initially, and as we were moving forward, and with the old definition in mind, is we said, okay, we'll post everything to social media as long as it exists somewhere else in the agency. So we were really pushing information, not allowing a whole lot to come back. If we got comments on our Facebook page or the Twitter feed or whatever, we would answer them back in an email. We'd tell them, contact us at this address and we'll answer your questions for you. Kind of clunky, but at least it satisfied all of our public records requirements. And we had our social media face going forward. It's a great tool because there's a lot of information you can get out there to a lot of different people. And most of it is, especially on Facebook, you get a lot of these 2 thumbs up, I like it. Well, that doesn't constitute a public record, But you'll get people who will tell you their life story and how are you going to help me and getting, through the situation and that sort of thing. And really, Facebook is not the medium to be discussing that in. Direct them somewhere else. But once we got the law changed, we are allowed to be able to take a little bit more sophisticated comments and answer those comments back because we can capture that and retain it in a different format, or so we're not really beholden to Facebook to manage our information for us. As I said, blogs aren't a big deal. Twitter's the one that I really find entertaining. I don't know if I don't have a Twitter page up, but how can you conduct business when you're limited to about 120 characters? I know they say 140, but in reality, it's about 120. So you start the IDKs, the LOLs, so now we've created a shorthand. Are you really saying what you truly are meaning? Really, Twitter is not the way to do public business. It's great if you want to tell somebody something quickly and get it out quickly. I don't know. I've avoided Twitter personally, but I am a big texter. And because my nieces and nephews won't talk to me on the phone, they'll only talk to me if I text. And again, you get into the shorthand. Texting's pretty easy. What we do is, because we do a lot of texting within our agency, our general policy is only use it for routine communications, that sort of thing. I'm running late. I'll see you at lunch, that sort of thing. But if you have to do something more of substance, we just include our email address as one of the recipients of our text message, and then it goes right to our email system. So we're covering any kind of public record issue that way. Again, the change in the law allows us to do that. One of the things you need to be mindful of when you're texting is, do you all have the same carrier in here? Your phone carrier, your cell phone carrier? You don't have a citywide carrier, you just...
There's a couple different. Yeah.
Okay, well, I can tell you, AT&T saves no messages. They date stamp it, and basically you get the time and date the message was sent, and who it went from and who it went to, and it's just phone numbers. Okay, so there's no message attached to it. So if you get it subpoenaed for a public records request or it relates to work, good luck, because you're never going to get the message back. Some other carriers, they'll keep it for the actual text of the message for like 30 days, and then they dump it. Again, you have no control over what Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, or AT&T are going to do because they own it. The state doesn't own it, or the city doesn't own it, so you have to figure out how else you're going to manage that. And, there is the whole thing, you can control what it's used for, but I think really if you're using it and it rises to that level of public record, just include your email address so that's a recipient and you're going to capture the message that way. I'm waiting for the next latest and greatest. Snapchat is the next thing, I think, that all these people are getting Snapchat accounts. I'm not sure what that is. But, every day I wake up to something, and I always go to the nieces and nephews to find out what the latest and greatest stuff is, because they have it. I don't. And then I just figure out how we're going to work around it for work. So, any questions on social media? It's great stuff. I don't know. Have many of you been to the Archives Facebook page? I just show you what a really cool tool it is. Can I get it on the internet here?
Yeah.
Really kind of cool tool it is.
The bottom,
the E here.
yeah.
What?
Ask me later.
I hope I can get to this. I didn't even think about it because I'll probably have to log into. And yes, we have a very long URL because we were the first archives in the world on the web, and this is not going to come up here, is it? I wonder if I can get in through there. Well, here's the Secretary of State's Facebook page. But, every day something goes up and just different information. This is our Blue Book event. That was the photographer who did the back cover of the Blue Book. But ours, I wish I could get to, I can't figure out how to get to it. It's kind of nice in that, I'll try to get into it through mine. Huh?
No, just hit no.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm not gonna get it on here, but what we've done with our Facebook page is turn it into where we put a document of the day or a photo of the day on there, and then give a little bit of information about it, and then have all the people who have subscribed to it go on and look at it, and it has turned into such a huge PR boom for us. Is people love going on. And we started out with 10 friends, and I think it was all of us on staff. I wonder if I can do it this way, if I can find it.
Ask you a question while you're looking
Yeah.
at that. So, I've heard that in government agencies in Oregon that they're not required to keep all the metadata, the comments, the and everything that's in there because of a law that was recently passed. I'm confused on that. So
No.
can you clarify what I've heard?
No, the change in the law, all it is said is that the law says is that, okay, we post this picture, we post that comment. That exists somewhere else in the agency. We only have to retain that information that we posted it. This is what we posted on this date. So your metadata is still there. If we receive comments and we respond to the comments, then we go back and we capture that, and there's a software tool that you can capture that. What it's just saying is you don't have to retain the Facebook page forever, because you're not going to have all that information. Facebook's going to take stuff down when they run out of room. So what we're saying is you have a responsibility, if it meets the public records test, is that you have to retain it somehow for that length of retention period. We're giving you an opportunity to do it a different way. Most of the posts we put up here don't rise to the level of a public record because it exists elsewhere. These photos, this is not the official copy of the Capitol being built. That photo actually exists in our holding. And how that goes about. I don't know if this is going to work. But right now, because it was the 75th anniversary of the Capitol being built, we've been running a couple of pages of the Capitol being constructed. But some of the other cool things that are in here is, okay, so there's during the state fair, we had a lot of state fair photos, the pig and the piglets. We just find different things. There's a downtown street.
I'm sorry.
Did you
Someone
hit me?
just sent. I didn't mean to interrupt you right there. I apologize.
I thought it was something I did. Phew.
No, I'm sorry.
But anyway, so we use it. We've run murder mysteries on here. Gone into our holdings and found like a murder case, and given everybody a piece of information every day, and that generates a whole lot of interest. You get a lot of people who are commenting and every day trying to figure out who did it and how they found them and that sort of thing. It can be a great tool to spark a lot of interest for your city. As long as you play within the rules, there's really not a reason not to use a tool like Facebook, because it does raise your profile in the community significantly. And for us, it's been all for the positive. I like this one. This is the hat contest at the fair. She's got a bird cage on her head. We just find all sorts of weird things there. That was archives. We had our open house, so we had people there. So we just post this is kind of a cool picture we found, somebody walking along the beaches and leaving footprints. But it's just turned into such a positive for us. People who never knew we existed now know we exist. So it brings visibility, it brings people in, it brings people looking for information that government has, that these photos would be squirreled away somewhere and never used unless somebody had gone through. And that's really sad when you have all this information that government creates that's really kind of valuable, like the Capitol being constructed, all of that information. Well, so then now we have people coming in saying, well, we want all the stuff on the Supreme Court building, because we want to do some major renovations. Where are all those records? So it really brings a whole different crowd into your visibility. So I would say, don't be afraid to use the tools that are there for you, because in reality, they'll help you a lot.
So to summarize just a little bit there, you're saying that to not be afraid to use the tools, and as long as our IT department has a system in place to capture like the Facebook page or whatever social media we're using, that we can go ahead and use it freely.
You don't even have to capture the Facebook page. You just have to capture the information if it rises to the level of a public record. Most of the time, what you're posting to Facebook already exists somewhere else in your agency. You don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Okay, it's only if you get responses back to that and those responses raise to the level of a public record. So if somebody says, I really like this page, or this is so cool, or things like that, that's not a public record. So you don't have to retain it. It doesn't mean it's not visibly accessible and that people aren't accessing the information. They are, but you don't have the retention and disposition associated with it. But if you have something in there, like we had posted a picture one time, it's one of my favorite pictures that we've ever posted on Facebook. Here's this Conestoga wagon, and all these horses pulling this wagon across the plains of Oregon, and there's this B-52 bomber flying above it. And it's like, okay, what's going on here, And we didn't have really any information about that photo. So we posted it saying, hey, this is a cool photo we came across. We really don't know what's going on here because it has limited information. The son of the photographer actually responded to it and told us exactly how that photo was shot, how it was set up, who took the picture, what it was for, that sort of thing. We captured that content because now that adds to the content, the information that we have about that photo in our holdings. That rose to the level of a public records request. So or a public records test. So we captured it. But 90% of what goes on our Facebook page doesn't rise to that level. It's just comments. It's just banter back and forth with people talking about it. We have some regulars. So they chat every day about the photo. This is the first thing I look at when I get up in the morning. It's like, wow. So it's just really, you need to, but you have to have policies and procedures that say what you're going to use it for. Because the last thing, we have seen where a DHS, and it wasn't in this state, so I'll make that very clear, social worker was conducting business with this client on Facebook. And he violated every privacy law, every HIPAA law, every caseworker law that's out there. But that was the medium that their client had, so that was how he was contacting them. And it's like, it doesn't excuse it. So just make sure you have those policies and procedures in place of what the tools can be used for and how they can be used. They're great tools, but they're social tools. They were meant to communicate easy and freely, and they're social. It's a social conversation. It's what we used to do at a social gathering. I don't know. It's hard pressed to get a teenager to talk to you face to face, but they'll text you a mile a minute. They'll sit in the back seat and text you, or sitting in their bedroom text you. I love it. I go to my sister's house and the kids call or text from their cell phones downstairs. Is dinner ready yet? It's like, come on.
So we do have, in Oregon City here, we do have the email policy and the social media policy in place. Mm-hmm. It's kind of always in revision because of the changing way it is. But could you address, imagine a Public Works employee out in the field and needs to send a message over to another Public Works employee, and they're texting back and forth, something about their project that they're working on. Mm-hmm. So can you speak to that? Is that a public record, and does it need to be captured?
It's going to depend on the content. If it's like, Joe, meet me here at 3. I need you at the site at 3. No, that's not a public record. But if it's like, I need this, this, and this, and these are the reasons why I need this, and they get into these long, involved conversations back and forth, yeah, then it is a public record. And really, what needs to happen, the employee that we know that does the texting most that constitutes the public record, he has it defaulted. Whenever he sends a message, it goes to his email box. That's one of the recipients immediately. When he types in Kate Brown, his email box comes in immediately, and so everything is going to his email box. So that's the secondary recipient.
So this could be like an aha moment for some of us that are using texting to do city business. That
Right.
we need to be concerned with the content of the message, and if it might rise to the level of being a public record, which you explained in your first few slides,
Mm-hmm.
then we need to be aware of that and send that text message to our email so it can be captured. That's what
Absolutely.
okay.
And believe me, there are a lot of people who still don't think email's a public record, but It is. And the last thing you want is because I can guarantee you, you delete stuff, the people you sent it to didn't delete it. You know, I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So somebody's going to have it. So if you sent it, it exists somewhere, because not everybody is as diligent as you, and that's what we're trying to deal with is looking at it. Have you done your responsibility? Have you captured the information you're supposed to capture? Are you retaining it according to the retention schedules? And are you destroying it at the appropriate time? Yes.
One of the things that we try to push in the city is pick up the phone, get it up out of your chair, walk over to your colleague's desk, have a conversation to where you're not creating a lot of garbage that you really need to get rid of. That's a really good tool to use.
Yeah, the phone is your friend. I know we don't have, I mean, our building is a very nice building, but where most of the employees sit, it's pods, you know, it's everybody has their little cubicle and everything. And a person 2 cubes down from you is sending you an email or texting you. It's like, really? You couldn't get up and come down and talk to me about something? Or you couldn't have, you know, I don't understand what the whole thing is about having the written communication. And people lose their brains with that too. I mean, when email first came out, the problem we had with email was everybody was telling water cooler jokes over email. And then they were embarrassed because they were getting fired because they were telling racist, sexist, whatever jokes on the state email system. Well, go figure, folks, it's written. At the water cooler, nobody wrote it down. I'm not excusing that behavior, but it's like now you've just given everybody, you know, the evidence against you, and we just really don't behave well in the electronic world. We really lose. I have seen more nasty communications in email than I ever saw in the written world. I mean, the funniest thing we used to find in the written world is the governor's office. They'd send over their files at the end of the administration, and you had a folder labeled crackpots. You know, and that was the people who came and talked. You know, would send them a letter a week or whatever, and they would just say, "Yeah, it's just Joe complaining again, so we're going to put them in the crackpot file. We'll respond, but we'll put them in the crackpot file." No, now what happens is somebody will forward that email message and say, "Can you believe this idiot and what he's saying?" And, you know, I mean, how the heck are we supposed to respond to somebody as stupid as this? Well, guess what? Now that's written, all of that's there for everybody and your brother to see, and now you're trying to defend why you called that guy an idiot. And you can't say, "Well, I never did it." Well, I have the email message that said you did, you know. It is like Bill Gates and the Microsoft, the antitrust thing. You know, we never said anything about monopolies. We never said anything about monopolies. The one email message that they talked blatantly about email was blown up to a life-size poster and greeted the jury every morning when they came in for the trial. Guess what? They lost. You know, I mean, it's not rocket science. But I'm not telling you to circumvent the law either by just doing verbal communications, but know when it's right to use the proper tools. Don't send personnel evaluations over email. It's not secure. And please don't do them on Facebook or in a blog, because I can hardly wait till we get the first one that's done like that, and then I'm going to just say, "I told you so."
So you're saying that, you know, that questionable email that I sent out, well, all I have to do is just delete it, right?
Yeah, because the recipient's not going to delete it, I can guarantee you. And you most likely send it to a group of your favorite friends, too, because they're going to get a chuckle out of it, and that they're getting a chuckle and keeping it, yes.
IT may have appliances that store every communication in and out of the mail system, so no matter whether you delete it or not.
Repeat that, please.
Oh, I was saying IT may have technologies in place to capture every communication in and outbound of that email system, eliminating your ability to delete that record and get it out of retention.
So, just be smart.
I have a two-part question. My world's mostly sewer and stormwater. We get requests for potential claims against the city. I want requests for all the sewer claims for the past 10 years or all the cleaning records for the past 10 years. And the retention schedule says only 5 years. Is it the appropriate response? We can only go back 5 years,
Yes.
and we don't have.
Yes, we're following our records retention schedule, and it says we only need to keep this stuff for 5 years. We will give you everything that we have available to you that we haven't destroyed already. But if you had them, and then you get the request, and you say, "Oh, now I'm going to go destroy them," guess what? You can't do that. But yes, if you are following your schedule as a routine, and they come and they ask you for 10, and you only have 5, you give them what you have.
And I think you answered my second piece was if the retention schedule is 5 years, but you happen to have 10 years worth of stuff, you got to give them everything.
Absolutely. So if you don't follow your schedule, everything's disclosable.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
So basically, just to kind of wrap things up here, social media can be a public record. Don't use it unless you have written policies and procedures. Same thing as regular policies. They have to address use, access, retention, and ownership, and have a plan on how you're going to capture any messages that satisfy that public records request or public records test. But in conclusion, with everything that we've talked about today, remember the storage of information is not the management of information, and that's the fatal error that we make, especially with the electronic records. If I had a nickel for everybody who told me storage was cheap, we'll just keep everything. Yeah, buying storage is very cheap, but you have to manage it and maintain it and migrate it and access it. It's extremely expensive to store everything. And it's a huge risk and huge liability for you to store everything. So remember, the storage doesn't equal management. You really do have to manage your information. Management starts the manual process. There's no magic bullet out there. There's no piece of software that can say, that can build your classification, that can tell you different things. Artificial intelligence isn't at that level yet. When it does reach that level, I hope to be retired so I don't have to worry about a new profession. But have written policies and procedures. In the paper world, we got away without having policies and procedures, or a policy and procedure that was written 20 years ago, and we just left it because, yeah, it kind of sort of applies. In the electronic world, you have to have them. I can tell you right now that when you go to court, that's the first question you're going to be asked. Do you have written policies and procedures that address how you manage your information and what it can be used for and who has access to it and how you're maintaining it? If you say no, the judge will instruct the jury they can basically view it as you're just operating in a void, and that you just do with your records as you see fit. So you could be willy-nilly destroying stuff that you might find damning down the road. So your written policies and procedures, that is key in the electronic world and in the 21st century, and it should address all your information. And if you're going with a technological solution, make sure you look at the system first. I can tell you that before the Secretary of State purchased their electronic system, I reviewed 8 of I think there were 15 of the DoD products out at that time. I reviewed at least 8 of them, and mostly we were limited because we were a group-wise email system at the time, and so we had a limitation on how many of them would actually work with group-wise. So instead of me having to review all of them, I just eliminated the ones that couldn't work with group-wise. But know what you want it to do. Don't let them say, well, we could make it work for you like that, because that workaround most likely is going to include additional software, additional money, and it's not going to work. Actually talk to the end user. IT can talk to the IT people, but really talk to your end users and ask them, has it made your life more miserable? And most likely they're going to say no, because I can actually find stuff now. it's really a business solution to that. And like I said, be critical and be informed. I know on the statewide system, we will do statewide demos. We will do demos for you whenever you ask. We do a lot of them virtually now. We figured I have presented to more city councils. I've been to more city council meetings in the last 2 years than I have been in my entire life. But we're willing to work with anybody on that. And I think that's where everybody needs to be moving towards, is because manually managing electronic records is not working. We really do need the help from hardware and software to do it. And if you,
I have another question. We have a viewer from Silverton, Oregon, Lisa Figueroa, and she has a question for you.
all right.
It was said that if we use personal computers at home, then it would be accessed for government retention. For example, what if at work we receive HR information for insurance changes, open enrollment, etc., and we forward that information to our personal home email? Do we need to consider that for retention too?
No, because it's not a public record. It doesn't meet the public records test. But if you are working on, let's say you're working on a contract and you want to work on it at home, so you forward it to your home email address and you work it on there and you save it to your home computer, that record can be accessed because it is a public record even though it exists on your home computer. But insurance information does not, your personal insurance information does not rise to the level of a public record.
But what if it's HR, city related insurance? I think that's what she's asking
No,
here.
because it's still your personal insurance. It's a benefit of your your
Oh, I see what
benefits
you're
is
saying.
not are not public records.
Okay.
The fact that you get benefits is a public record, but your actual benefit forms and that sort of thing are not public records.
Okay, but you would not necessarily advocate doing city business on your home personal computer,
No,
right?
no,
Okay.
not at all. If you're going to work from home, make sure you either have a Citrix account or some other way that you can work directly on your agency's servers and computer systems. Do not use your home computer as a work computer.
Because it can be accessed
As a public record.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have they changed the rules about permanent records? Can they be stored electronically if they're stored off-site?
No, we are moving towards that. There are going to be a couple of qualifiers for storing, and we're actually, as we speak, working on Division 17 right now. If you are in an electronic records management system that is DoD 5015.2 certified, and you are saving those documents in a non-proprietary format, so for a text document, if you're saving it like in a PDF or PDFA or an MP3 or something that a TIFF or that, then you can petition the state archivist to allow the electronic record to serve as your permanent record. But unless we know that you have a migration strategy in place and that you're in a system that we know can easily move that information forward, you still have to have paper or microfilm.
Okay, the problem that we are running across is I'm with the building department and we're supposed to keep records for the life of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Life of the structure, if it hits over 100 years, then it has to be on microfiche or paper form. So we can't destroy anything in case that building reaches 100 years old.
Yeah, we're working on that retention too.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I can tell you, the one thing about the electronic world is it makes writing retention periods, especially when you go in an electronic records management system. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. It makes you rethink the whole way you do stuff, because in the paper world, it was easy to go pull the files of those structures that were still in existence. In the electronic world, it's a lot more difficult because those pieces exist in a lot of different places. So capturing it. So we have to be more diligent in saying, okay, this building was built like the archives building. This building was built as a 100-year building. We already know it's a long-term building. But you know, the shed out at the Public Works facility, we know is not a 100-year building. We'll be lucky if it's there for 10 years. So we need to start looking at how we write retentions differently. So
I'm also with the building department, and building on that, we're going towards an electronic plan review system. If we're only receiving the plans or the retention electronically, does that make a difference?
nope.
You have to print it out and retain it in paper.
Well, or have it put to microfilm from electronic, unless you have these other qualifications met. And we understand that, because the more and more of the world is being created electronically. But I also have a responsibility, if it meets that test that it is an historical record or has long-term record, how am I going to ensure that you're going to have that record? We've learned a lot of very expensive lessons since technology has come into play, is that we are losing information at an exponential rate right now because of technological obsolescence. I mean, how many of you still have McWrite software? Word 1? Yeah. You can't even open, you go to and Microsoft's a perfect example of this, is you go back 2 generations of Microsoft applications, Microsoft Office applications, they will not open today unless you go out to the website, capture some sort of piece of software. Well, who's going to do that? You basically say, well, forget it. I'm not just going to open it. Unfortunately, that we have a lot of information that was lost because the software no longer exists or the hardware no longer exists. So I have to make sure that you're protecting yourself, because you're ultimately responsible for that information for as long as that retention period stays. If you can ensure me that that information is going to be around for 100 years, then yeah, I'm going to give you the waiver and let you keep it electronically. But if you can't guarantee, well, we're putting the tapes in the back of my car, and every year I go bring them back and get a new set of tapes because those other ones have been exposed to heat and cold and everything else. I'm going to tell you no. Because I can tell you right now, you've lost probably half the information. And people do that. People still think that storing backup tapes in their garage or in their car or whatever is a good plan. And I mean, it's the reality is it's not. You're going to lose your information. So I'm hoping, ultimately my goal would be to get every city, every governmental entity in Oregon into an electronic records management system. And yes, selfishly, I would like it to be the statewide system because it makes my job a lot easier. Or then I can even say, from my standpoint, is I'm going to accept anything that's a permanent record. I want you to do a PDF and an MP3 or whatever. But, I'm also can then say, I could go every year and do a search on everything that's permanent that came into the system in 2013 and run a roll of microfilm off and have it for a backup just in case until we're sure that all this is moving forward and take the burden off of you. But I really do think with these electronic records management systems that if you designate the format that the permanent record has to be in, we'll be able to access them for forever. And that's why, the legislature had a CourtSmart system for all their audio tape. And when they went to CourtSmart, they said, well, we want you to buy CourtSmart so then you just to take those tapes and be able to play them. And we said, no. It's proprietary. It'll probably be going out of business. We want MP3 files. Oh, okay. So they convert all their CourtSmart tapes to MP3 files. Guess what went out of business? Guess what's being eliminated? CourtSmart. We're going to a different audio system. So I would have had a very expensive proprietary software to manage and maintain with no company there to back it up. But I can manage an MP3 file because I know it's kind of become the de facto standard of audio. So I can show you a building full of obsolete technology and information that we have a really hard time accessing anymore. If you want to come down to the archives, and 8.5-inch floppy drives. Anybody got an 8.5-inch floppy drive disk anymore? 5 1/4? 3.5?
So Mary Beth, so just to quickly follow up on that, scenario, if the city of Oregon City went with the HP trim system and the law was changed so that we could keep records permanently in electronic format,
Yep.
then at that point we wouldn't have to keep all of our paper copies anymore, but we would keep everything in this HP trim system, as long as we had that system or a DoD certified
Right.
system in place.
Right.
But the law has to be changed.
We're working.
You're working on that.
Yeah, it should be changed right at the beginning of the first of the year. That will allow this option.
Oh, great.
Yes.
That's the best news I've heard all day.
That's your selling piece for going into the system, right?
Okay, so talking about convenience copies. So at the pool, for example, we take information that's written down and we transfer it to, like, let's say an Excel spreadsheet. At that point, can we get rid of the paper copy and just keep what is saved electronically? Is that considered a convenience copy, like attendance, for example?
Yeah, because it has less than 100-year retention, so you're not meeting that long-term value. You don't have to keep the paper. You can just keep the electronic. Once you're verified that that information is there, you only need to keep one copy that you designate as the official copy. I would probably have a business practice that basically says, when we get these sheets, it's probably part of your procedures. When we get these sheets, we're putting them into Excel. We verify that the information is in there, and then we're getting rid of the paper. And then we'll be retaining the Excel spreadsheet according to the retention schedule.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, please don't be printing me out purchase orders, just because you need to have a paper copy. But there are still people who really still have to see paper, and we're really working hard on those short-term retentions. It's created electronically, leave it electronically, and let's manage it that way.
I haven't really heard it. I don't know if I asked my question correctly, and I haven't heard an answer to it, except for that maybe that software you're talking about that might be a couple years. But if you have a project file and you have both paper, you have a digital directory, and you have an email directory, and it's not going to be permanent retention, is that stuff you can all dump onto a CD and put in storage for 5 years?
Yeah, you can put it on. I wouldn't put it on a CD, but I would, because CDs aren't really long term. But you could dump it, and you could just retain it electronically. Put it in a folder that says delete 5 years from now, and go ahead and delete it 5 years. You don't even have to transfer it off, unless you have a storage limitation on your server, and then you would have to do it that way. But then you would put it off onto another device, an external hard drive, or
because you got emails and you got.
Doesn't matter. It's all 5-year stuff, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You just manage it as one. You don't need to You don't need to print out all those emails.
I guess, I can convert them to PDFs and save them in the digital file.
I mean, yeah, and I mean the nice thing about these electronic record systems is you don't even have to do that. Your email is managed just like any other record. You don't have to create a PST file. You don't have to put it into any other format. It just goes in there and is managed as an email message
With the software.
with the software. But if you're doing it manually, then I would probably look at some way that I'm moving it and then I'm just retaining it and I'm deleting it all as one. But please don't go printing them all out for such a short retention period.
And what about the people who continue to insist that they understand that the retention is only 2 years for this item. However, they've saved the city money because they've held on to things longer and they've been able to, and there's people out there and you cannot convince them to remove anything.
Yeah, that's an internal policy decision that has to. How do you deal with people who refuse to comply with the rules and the law? It actually is a liability, and it's
but they've saved the city money.
Yeah, I've heard that too, but they've also it's Yes and no. I mean, it's one of those things that, are there exceptions to the retention rules? Absolutely. And those are the times, that's when you say, hey, you know what? This now has taken on a different life than that 2-year record. It needs to be kept for this. But in reality, the majority, I would say 99% of the time, when that 2 years is up, those records have no value anymore. And they're really not needed to do anything except clog up the system.
As we start moving further and further into a paperless format, does the state archives have any guidance for municipalities in terms of validating and approving electronic signatures for documents?
I wish the state had one. Digital signature, you can use a digital signature. Digital signatures are legal. Again, you need to have a policy that basically says you will accept a digital signature. What do you want that digital signature to look like? Do you have a software that's creating your digital signature? What's the security around that? They're perfectly legal. A lot of the issue is not that the fact that they're not legal, is the courts still like the wet signature and a lot of things. In certain transactions, they still like wet signatures. It's a cultural change, and the law is out there that you can use a digital signature. It's just the culture hasn't kept up with that law. I mean, that law has been in place for at least 5 years, if not longer. But it's getting people to accept that digital signature as a valid signature. And that, again, it's a cultural change. It's not a legal change. Anything else? Well, if you need to get a hold of me, that's my email and my phone number. Well, you can get me through that number. Or you can go to our website. But feel free to ask questions. You know, it's a changing world. There's a lot of things that are going to change in how we manage our information, but we're trying to make it easier and more straightforward and streamlined, and that's our ultimate goal. So I can honestly tell you that the whole ORMS project that was pilot, it was supposed to be pilot for 3 years. It officially came out of pilot a year early. So it's working. It's just now a matter of getting other people to come on board and use it so that we can start seeing the economies of scale of using the statewide system. But I think it'll make your life a lot easier. It definitely will change a lot of your business processes because you can automate a whole lot and eliminate a whole lot of duplication.
And we've learned a lot of lessons and have a lot of examples and have created a lot of processes and procedures that can help cities that are just starting to come on board. So we have a lot of information to share.
Yeah, we have 15 really good examples. So, and up here you have most of them are up here. So we have Beaverton, Hillsborough, Milwaukee, West Lynn, Dundee, Tualatin and Hills Park and Rec, and now we are just adding Reedsport Justice Courts, the Board of Pharmacy, but other state agencies that are around are the Public Utilities Commission, the Secretary of State, Department of Energy, Lane County and Tillamook County. So, yeah, the Department of Human Services, it's such a large agency, it's just trying to find the right department within DHS to implement has been our struggle. But we have a lot of people in and a lot of happy customers so far. So, alrighty, you're free to go 15 minutes early. Look at that.
Thank you, Mary Beth, for
Thank
being
you.
here.